Good day, students, and welcome to lesson number 2 for oral communication. In today's lesson, we are going to talk about the different models of communication. Now, for starters, here are the objectives. By the end of this learning unit, you will be able to define communication models, differentiate the various communication models, and then finally, identify these models as they are used in real life scenarios. Okay, so in this lesson, specifically, we are going to have the following components. First would be the definition of a communication model. Second, we have the types of communication models categorized according to their structure. And then finally, we have specific examples of other models which fall under each category. Okay, so let's go to the first component. Okay, so let's ask ourselves, what is a communication model? Now, when we read the comics or manga in your language, probably, and watch cartoons, when the characters talk, a speech bubble appears, or probably the actual words come out of the mouth. Well, in reality, that's not what happens when people talk in real life. The only thing that's visible would be the speakers talking. We don't see speech bubbles appear. We don't see actual words come out of the mouth. We don't even see the ideas being exchanged. Now, for us to understand what's going on, we need to assign visual representations of that communicative event. And to do that, we have these communication models. We have three: the linear, interactive, and transactional. You have to understand they are arranged in increasing complexity, beginning with the linear model. Now, to me, this one is the most basic model because, as the name suggests, this is communication that occurs in a line. We have the sender, the message, and then the receiver. Now, the focus of the linear model is actually just the sender and the message. The receiver is nothing more than the terminating point of the communicative event. Now, when we say this is linear or one way, we mean that no feedback is given by the receiver back to the sender. Okay, so this is the visual representation. So we have the sender, the message, and the receiver. Mind the arrows. As you can see, they are pointing in a single direction. And that will tell you that communication flows in one direction or in a single direction. Now, over the years, people realized that, okay, yes, communication might be one way, but in some instances, people respond to what is said. And because of this response, the interactive model was developed. In the interactive model, communication is no longer just one way. Instead, a communicative exchange now happens. And this exchange is possible because the sender and the receiver now have alternating roles as senders and receivers. So if the sender sends out a message to the receiver can also send a message back to the sender. And these alternating roles allow them to keep the cycle going for as long as they respond to what is said, or until such time that the communicative event is terminated. And as you can see in this chart right here, we now see two sets of arrows. One going from the receiver one going from the sender to the receiver, and another from the receiver back to the original sender. But this is not at all how people communicate, especially now. In some cases, we don't take alternating roles as speakers and listeners, or senders and receivers. Sometimes we talk at the same time, especially in a classroom. Pre-COVID, when the teacher talks, some of the other students might be talking at the back, or while someone is explaining concepts up front, there'd be chit chats across or inside the classroom and among the students. And that is an example of the interactive model. People are simultaneously senders and receivers of messages. And so the transactional model was developed. And this is the latest addition to all the communication models. Now, here, we don't just look at senders and receivers and messages and where the communication is flowing. We also take into consideration the different contexts that govern the communicative event or that influence the communicative event. When I say contexts, this is what I mean. Okay, we have two. First would be the physical and the psychological contexts. Now, in the previous lesson, we talked about noise, right? So if two people were talking and noise is present, the actual message might be influenced, impeded, or hampered by this particular noise or this particular barrier. When the psychological aspect is, or when a psychological barrier is there, the communicative event is also influenced. By psychological context, I mean your frame of mind. For example, your friend is talking about, say, a brand new TV series, and you're just not mentally prepared to talk about that because you have not seen any of the episodes. That is the type of context which is psychological in nature. It could also be something that has to do with emotions. If you're just not in the mood to talk to this person, then the communicative event might not happen at all. So the second type of context would be the relational context. And by relational, we mean relationships. Sometimes friendships are born out of a random conversation, right? First day of school, you come to class, you don't know anybody. Suddenly, one of your classmates will approach you and say, "Hey, do you know who our teacher is?" And then you get to talking. And then from that conversation, you begin to develop a friendship. That is one example of a relational context. Another, when you talk to your parents, that's a totally different way than how you talk to your friends or how you talk to your teachers. And we become so flexible. We become like a totally different person when talking to different groups of people. And that is influenced by the relational context. Our closeness or our distance from one another in terms of relationships will in turn determine how we talk to one another. So probably you're much more comfortable talking to people who you are very close to, and probably you are much more reserved communication-wise when talking to people you do not know. Okay, so we're done with component 1 and component 2. We now go to the final component, which would be the specific models, which also fall under these three general types: linear, interactive, and transactional. So we go to the examples for linear models, and we have Aristotle's model. Now, his model is the earliest communication model known, and this is a speaker-centric model. During their time, they were considered to be great sources of knowledge and information. Okay? The likes of Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, they were the think tanks of their generation. And even to this time, they're still considered as think tanks. Now, when I say that this is speaker-centered, this is probably rooted on the fact that when they were in their prime, when Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates were in the apex of their career as philosophers, people flocked just to listen to them. Okay? So this would totally be justified by the fact that they were considered to be great sources of knowledge. And so the highlight of the entire communicative event is on the speaker because they were famous in their respective fields, experts in their fields. However, Aristotle believed that yes, while the speaker is important, there are also other factors that come in. First, we have the credibility of the speaker or the ethos. When a speaker is credible, people listen. When a speaker is deemed not credible, people get bored. This is true to this day. Second, we have connectivity or pathos. Connectivity has something to do with the rapport that you establish with your audience. The more interactive you are, the more you involve your audience in your speech, and the more that you are able to captivate your audience, the more that the focus will be set on you, the more they will listen. And then finally, we have logic or logos. In logic, this has something to do with what you say and how these statements are arranged. So when we look at Aristotle's model, it focuses on the speaker, the relational context or the relationship established by the speaker with the listeners. And then finally, we also look at how the speaker constructed the actual speech. Now, to give you a visual representation of how Aristotle's model looks like, this is a perfect example. You have the speaker, the speech retrofitted to the occasion, which would benefit the audience greatly because the speech is crafted for them and because of the occasion which they are attending. And then finally, this communicative event will somehow have an effect on the people who are listening to that particular speech. Second, we also have a derivation of Aristotle's model, and this one is Laswell's model. Now, if in Aristotle's model the focus was the speaker, this one focuses on the other end of the communicative event, which is the effect. So the speaker is pretty much just a vessel of the communicative event. This is the person who is going to initiate everything. But at the end of the day, the speaker is not the important factor. It is how the people react to what is said or the effect that your speech has on the listeners. For example, if you want people to say stop smoking, it doesn't really matter who's going to make them stop smoking. What's important is that we achieve the goal of making the people stop. So this is the differentiation between Aristotle's model and Laswell's model. Aristotle was focused on who was talking. Laswell wanted to focus on how did the speech influence the listeners. And you could understand why he wanted to focus on this one because Laswell's model was used in the field of public relations, wherein the effect of the speech is very, very important. These applications are still visible to this day, especially in the fields of marketing. They have to come up with a marketing strategy that will achieve their purpose, probably to increase sales. So they are going to go through the grueling process of doing research and development and the development of certain marketing strategies that they feel will help them achieve their goal, okay, which will have the desired effect. Okay, so we have the third example of a linear model. And this might come as something that's a little bit tricky because in the chart, in the photo, you see that there's feedback. However, the proponents of this model were actually one of the frontliners of the linear approach. And these are Shannon and Weaver. Now, in this model, the feedback is actually optional. The focus of Shannon and Weaver's model would be the influence of noise in the communicative event. Okay, so if Aristotle focused on the speaker and Laswell focused on the other end, which is the effect, Shannon and Weaver's model focused on what's between the speaker and the effect. Why? They believe that no matter how good the speaker is, the desired effect will never be a reality if noise is present in the middle, or if noise is going to influence how the people interpret the original message. And that's true. Sometimes when we encounter people who have difficulty in understanding each other because they don't share a common language, one person means well, it was taken in a different manner because the language is not common. This disparity in language is a form of noise. And the desired effect was not acquired because noise was present. Okay, so Shannon and Weaver wanted to focus on the middle portion. Okay, they said the effect will come if noise is dampened or eradicated. And it doesn't really matter if the speaker is good or is bad. If the noise is present, the desired effect will still not come true. Okay, so that would be everything for the linear model. We go to the interactive model, and we have one example, and this is Wilbur Shrams' model. And in Shrams' model, there is the interaction between speaker and receiver or audience. But he focuses on the notion of the field of experience, and that successful communication can only happen if the fields of experience of the receiver and the sender overlap. Without this overlap, successful communication cannot occur. Let's go back to my example. Two friends are talking. One wants to talk about the new TV series, which the other party has not seen. If they were to continue on that topic, no successful communication is going to occur. Why? They have no common ground. One has seen the series, the other one has not. So this other person cannot fully participate in the communicative event because of the lack of knowledge. Their fields of experience are not overlapping. Okay? Instead, they belong on two different parts. We have the speaker here and the receiver here. Their fields of experience do not overlap. And as such, their communicative event is not successful. Okay, finally, for transactional model, we have Burlos model. And as you may remember, the transactional model takes into account the context, both relational and physical and psychological. So here, communication is affected by extraneous factors, outside factors which are found in both the relational contexts or the physical and psychological context. So we have Burlos model, or what we call the SMCR model: source, message, channel, and receiver. However, there are certain factors which have to be considered under each of those components. For the source, we have to look at the communicative skills. We have to look at the attitude of the speaker, the knowledge base of the speaker, the social systems, the language, the culture. All of these things have to be taken into consideration. For the message, we have to look at the content of the message. We have to look at the elements that we have included, the treatment of the analysis, the structure of our speech, and then finally, how do we code the whole thing? What words do we assign to encapsulate exactly what we mean? Okay, so context, basically. And that goes the same for the channel and the receiver. So in Burlos' model, this one captures the essence of the transactional model on point, or to a fine point, because they transcend, they go beyond just the sender message receiver paradigm. Instead, they take into consideration different contexts which may influence the success or failure of the communicative event. And that would be all for our lesson for today. We have covered the three components. And should you need additional readings on this particular topic, you can access this link so that you can read further and know more about the different communication models found in this lesson. And with that, I believe that would be all for today. I hope that you learned much from our lesson. Again, I would like to thank you for taking the time out of your day to watch and listen to this lecture. And this has been Sir Dardar. I wish that you all would have a wonderful day ahead. I'll see you in the next lecture video. Toodles.